Hello, everyone. It is Thursday, January 26th, and we've reached the last session of game music composition. So, hopefully, you are doing well, rounding out all of your assignments for week 4. We talked in our last session about a few assignments that you have coming up this week. You're going to be finishing out the sound design for Angry Bots, and you're also going to be creating one final version of all of your game captures so that you can share them in a discussion post on FSO, and we can see how everybody's final progress ended up with all of these game projects. So, overall, through this month, we've shown you a couple of different approaches to how your music works in the game. Really, the overall purpose, as we kind of round out everything here in this final week, we're really showing you how your music is appropriate in a game just as much as it is in any other media or any other format. And we want to show you how your music actually makes it into a game and the overall process so that you would understand if a game soundtrack opportunity ever came your way, whether or not you would be interested in working in this format or working on these types of projects overall, and give you insight into the industry and give you some insight into the skills and the job of a music composer for games. And hopefully over the course of the projects and the material that we've covered, you might have a newly found interest or maybe even a long time interest in wanting to work on games. And so this afternoon we'll talk about some of the resources that are available of how do you find clients and how do you find projects to work on. Basically, how do you take the next steps beyond this class? If you want to find other projects to get involved with, you want to research different game companies and different job opportunities that are out there. We'll talk about different approaches to getting started in the industry and getting a few projects under your belt. We will also continue our discussion of the tools and technology that are involved in the process of getting your music working in a game. We talked a little bit about audio middleware tools like Fmod and Wise, and we also want to talk about the other half of that equation, which is game engines. And I think, there we go. Our first slide here will be our first topic. And we also want to talk a little bit about what game engines can do for us, how they work with our music, and some of the interactivity that comes along with putting your music in the game. What are some of the changes and processes that can happen to your music and sound effects that can create variation and create a mix and interactivity during gameplay. So a lot of that is controlled by the game engine itself. So those are our main topics that we will get into this afternoon with a kind of a finishing out of discussion of our technology topics with our game engines, and then we're going to talk about how to get started in the games industry as a music composer or a sound designer. If you have any questions as we're going along in this final session here, any questions about any of the assignments or any of, anything that we've discussed throughout the month, please let me know. And of course, we'll stick around for a few afterwards to field any questions that come up. So let me take a quick pause before we get into this. Go ahead and post up any questions if you have them right now. here in the chat, Cristobal, I have been referring to the videos from Interactive Audio for making some of these sound effects in Audacity and Logic. Very helpful. Absolutely. Interactive Audio kind of lays the groundwork for a lot of the topics that we talk about as you build music and sound effects in different layers, and you create it so that it can be put into different files and kind of stacked on top of each other, or kind of shuffled around into different orders. A lot of that stuff was kind of the same, at least in concept, from what you were doing in Interactive Audio. And with Audacity and Logic, there's a lot of techniques that are covered in that class. Absolutely, great resource. All right, so game engines. This is, as I mentioned earlier, kind of the other half of the equation of how your music starts out in the DAW. It starts out in your as your composition or as your sound design. You bounce it out into a folder that you have that is filled with WAV files. And now you want to take your music and your sound effects and do something to them to actually get them working and playing back in the game. And that process is using tools like audio middleware and game engines to basically set up the interactivity of your music and sound effects to work and play back in the game. And so as I talk about these concepts, I like to refer back to something that, or ideas that we are already familiar with, concepts that we are already familiar with, and in some loose, very general way, try to connect it to the concept or idea of mixing, where in mixing, it's the process of taking audio files that have already been created. They've been you've recorded them, you've composed the music. A lot of times the process of composition and mixing are kind of intertwined these days in the modern DAW, but there's the process of creating all of the audio, and then there's often a separate stage of taking those tracks and mixing them with volume and pan and effects processing, and using automation and control of all of the tools to finally make a perfect stereo mix that everybody listens to, either streaming online or on a disc somewhere. So this process of getting our music working in the game, we are taking the content that's already been created, that has been created, we've composed our music, we've built all of our sound effects, and we're taking those raw assets and we're doing something to them. We're going to use some software to set them up and control how they play back and their volume or the overall mix of the sounds in the game. We have control of real-time processing. We have basically automation control of how sounds play back and how they change over time. And we use all of these tools to create the final stereo mix or even 5.1 mix that somebody hears while playing the game. And in the tools of music production is your DAW and all of your plugins. You have a wide variety of plugins that come either default with your DAW, or over time you acquire different interesting plugins. And those are your synths and your effects processors, EQs, reverbs. There's all sorts of different stuff. So when, again, loosely comparing that over into music for games, audio middleware is sort of like a plugin for your game. We talked about Fmod and Wise and how they are able to set up and control your audio to prepare them to work with the game. So if audio middleware is similar to a plugin where your DAW can probably do 80 to 90% of everything you need to do in the game. You have plugins that allow you to do stuff. They sound cooler. They work better. They allow you to do stuff more efficiently. They allow you to get a better sound in a quicker fashion. Well, your audio middleware tools like Fmod and Wise allow you to set up the interactive mix and the interactive behavior in your game in a quicker and more efficient manner that ultimately probably sounds better overall. Your game itself could probably do, again, 80 to 90% of what you needed to do with your music and your sound effects in your game. I mean, it depends on what it is. It probably could do 100% of everything if it's a more of a simple approach to gaming. But if it's more complex overall, a lot of these tools allow you to easily take advantage of some advanced features. So if audio middleware is like a plugin and it kind of extends the functionality of your game, then the game engine is like your DAW. It's the main tool that you use to create your game. And now it's not just going to be you as the music composer or sound designer. It's going to be the game team that is using a game engine to create and develop their game. Much in the same way that you use your DAW, or a team of people recording an album uses a specific DAW to create and craft their music. A game engine is a tool that people use, or a team of people use, to create and craft their game. Of which a portion of that is audio. And that's, of course, the main thing that we're focusing on overall. So also in a very bad, loose comparison, just in the same way that your engine is the thing that makes your car go, a game engine is the thing that makes your game go. It's the main tools. It's often, you can think about it as like a toolbox. It's got a wide variety of different instruments and tools that allow you to create and build your game. So, game engines, they come generally in two parts, because there's in a very, very high level way, there's two main components of what's going on here. There's everything that is creative about the game. There is the graphics, the animation, the sound, the music, the dialogue, the story, everything that is separate from the technical side. The technical aspects are the code and the programming and the gameplay and the networking and getting everything to work on a computer and get all the components to talk to each other. So you have the technical side and the creative side, and both of those have to use a set of tools to make a very creative and technical game. So a game engine kind of bridges those that gap between. There is a whole bunch of code that makes up the back end, basically the main skeleton or structure of the game. And there is what is also often known as a game editor, or a world builder, or a world editor, or some sort of graphic interface, some sort of graphic piece of software that allows you to visually see like a window into the game world and allows you to adjust and change different aspects of it. So a team of people go in and somebody paints the sand on the ground, somebody puts trees in there and all the foliage, somebody animates the ocean to lap up against the beach. Often you see icons kind of floating in different spaces. A lot of times that is sound. Where there isn't a visual, like there isn't just a tree there showing what's going on. For every single sound, they have to, since it's invisible, they have to place an icon which generally represents the center of that sound. And you can see sometimes big squares and spheres that represent how far that sound travels in the game world. So just in the same way where a team of people use a DAW to record and produce a music album, a team of game developers use a game engine to create their game. And there's a wide variety of different game engines out there. I guess I should mention a few popular ones. All of our games this month are made on the Unity game engine. If you play a lot of mobile games, either Android or iOS games, a lot of those are created using the Unity game engine. It's quite popular. There's also the Unreal game engine, which is also extremely popular. Or is the main tool that is used to make a lot of different very, very popular games out there. They're often big, what are known as AAA titles, big budget, high money making titles. It's a very popular set of tools to use. There is the Source game engine, which is from Valve, Valve Software. They make a lot of very popular games. They make the Team Fortress series, Half-Life series, Left 4 Dead series, Portal, and a couple of others out there. What else? There's the Frostbite game engine, which is Electronic Arts, which is a lot of, well, not currently, but mainly the Frostbite engine is from the Battlefield series of games, and Electronic Arts is adopting it for a lot of other games out there. What else is popular? Things like games that have been popular for a very long time, Doom and Quake. There's a brand new Doom game out there. The like Call of Duty series. Those games often have their own proprietary technology that only works. I mean, that their company owns the rights to the technology. So there's a wide variety of different tools out there. A lot of them have been developed over the years, so that it's kind of like Pro Tools and Logic. They existed in lots of different forms and are have had many different versions over the years and have matured into a pretty impressive kind of suite of tools. We'll talk about different game engines, and we'll talk specifically about the Unity game engine and the Unreal game engine. And I definitely want to mention that all of these tools that I talk about are all free and available for you to download to check out different games that are also available, where you can rip out all of the sounds and the music and add your own and kind of work with these very important tools in game development. Definitely take advantage of downloading the free tools because if nothing else, open them up and just check out what they're all about. They're free. You can look at tutorials and basically have some really, really good material for portfolio or demo reel. So I do want to express the fact that a game engine isn't just for audio. A game engine covers all aspects of game development. The part, of course, that we're most focused on is the audio portion of it, but it does a lot of other things. A lot of what a game engine does is the graphics. Games are kind of bought and sold on the quality of their graphics. New games come out, they look amazing. Lots of people are interested in checking them out and buying them. A lot of what a game is doing in real time is generating those graphics, and the graphics don't exist in their final form until the game is played. Meaning all of the visuals that you see, it's not like a movie that's rendered onto a game or onto a disc somewhere. Everything has to be rendered in real time. Compare that against the music for a better example. The music is not rendered in real time. The game does not create the music. All of the heavy lifting was done by a human, by the music composer ahead of time, and now it might be kind of separated into a whole bunch of stems and little pieces that need to be rearranged, but the actual composition of the music was done ahead of time. The graphics, there is still folks that are creating models and textures and animations, but the final version of what is seen on the screen is not complete until somebody plays the game. The gameplay is how does the game actually play? What kind of game is it? Is it a racing game or a puzzle game or a fighting game or any wide variety of different type of game out there? It's how the game controls, what's the story, what's the objective, what's the characters. It is what separate from the technology, the actual game itself. So that's a large portion of what the game can actually do. It's a lot of the interactivity. It's how the game itself plays. Networking, physics, AI, these are heavy math fields. of study that the technology that is involved in making two computers or multiple computers work across a multiplayer game across the internet, physics or how things kind of blow up and fall and explode and break apart. AI is artificial intelligence, making the enemies seem smart or dumb. These are heavy scientific fields that have tools that a lot of game developers want to get access to, but don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time. Like with networking, when you're doing a multiplayer online game, you don't necessarily need to reinvent how the internet works or how two computers talk back and forth to each other. A lot of those tools exist, and game companies can use a game engine to do those to get that functionality. Same thing with physics and AI. You don't have to want to reinvent how those are created. It's kind of like if you wanted to go build a house, you wouldn't want to have to reinvent the concept of what a hammer and nail is to start building. There's a store, they have a hammer, they have nails, they have wood that you can start building your house, and you can start from a basic set of tools, much like a game engine. Same thing with audio. You don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time you want the speaker to play some ones and zeros. A lot of those tools exist, and these game engine tools do a lot for how our music and sound effects are going to be playing back in the game, along with the graphics and every other aspect of the game. So, the very popular tools out there, the Unity game engine is kind of came up through the mobile gaming boom. Let's see, a couple of years ago, I don't know, what is it now, less than 10 years ago, certainly, everybody started getting smartphone devices. You could start playing games on your phone. All sorts of new technology was available on these devices. And previous to that, really the only way you were playing games was to have your home gaming console or your PC and to go buy a $50 or $60 game and put it in your game console and play your game. But once mobile gaming came along, once smartphones and tablets became more available, now you have online gaming distribution and games that are $1 or just a couple of dollars, and a whole new market out there for people playing games. And so Unity came up and provided technology to some of these smaller game companies. The smaller game teams that were making games for mobile devices could not get access to the really popular game tools at that time because they were hundreds of thousands of dollars. They were certainly not cheap at all. And so Unity comes along and finds a market of smaller developers that have basically little to no money and go off and end up creating this hit new game that sells millions of times over. And so Unity comes along with a set of tools that is much cheaper and much more available to independent developers. So they're based out of San Francisco, popular on mobile and web platforms, free for educational purposes. Let's see here. Give you a heads up and show you what I'm talking about here. You can go to unity3d.com. Where's my tab here? There we go. And download the software and get access to some pretty interesting game projects. Let's see. If you go to Unity and you can choose Get Unity, you can choose the personal version is the one that you would need. It has everything that you need. All of our games were built with this version. And you can download it and get access to a couple of different game projects. Let's jump back over to the store. Where is the asset store? Also on Unity's site, they have a online store with a whole bunch of different media. A lot of it is for a price, but there's a lot of free projects on here too. If you go to Unity Essentials, there's a lot of different game projects that are available. I'm going to turn on free, and it'll only give me the free ones. And you can see where a couple of these are new games available to check out. Really interesting environments for music and sound effects. 2D platformers here. Angry Bots is also somewhere in the store. Viking Village is a very impressive environment that you could populate with music and sound. They have a new adventure game, which is kind of like a point-and-click game that has the opportunity for music and sound. And really, they're really small kind of tutorial levels, demos. They're freely available. They're there to kind of teach different gaming concepts and show off the technology to get people to use their tools, but there's a lot of opportunity for sound in them also. So, great stuff to check out. I highly recommend downloading the software and getting access to some of these tools and some of these game levels that you can work with. There's also, if I go to the Learn tab, I can go to tutorials and audio. And there's a couple of different tutorials on Unity and how to set up audio and music in their game software, adding music to your game. And it gives a lot of information. There's a whole lot of other tutorials out there also on how to set up and work with these tools. So free for our purposes. If you went off and made a game, even I think if it sells quite a bit, you have to make some money before they actually start charging for the game tools. So worthwhile to check out at unity3d.com. One of the main reasons that you use a game engine is that it's available on a whole lot of different platforms. So you would make your game once, and it would be more a direct path to go between multiple different platforms. So it works on Xbox and PlayStation and PC and Mac, iOS, Android, lots of different popular gaming platforms out there. It uses a version of Fmod. We talked about Fmod and Wise, and Fmod EX is like the code-only version of it. All of the audio is kind of hidden behind the Unity interface, so you would just use their direct software. But it does integrate with Fmod and Wise, their authoring tools, so that you can kind of use the specialized audio tools if necessary, which I would definitely highly suggest if getting involved with a game, trying to convince the game team to use tools like Fmod and Wise. Another very popular game engine, this kind of comes in on the high side, popular for large, big budget game console games. This very popular tool to make large AAA, high quality, big budget games for a very long time. The Unreal Engine is made by Epic Games. They are based out of Cary, North Carolina. And Epic Games has been making games for quite a while. You may have played an Unreal game at some point, Unreal or Unreal Tournament, Tournament 2004, Unreal Tournament 2 and 3, and 2007. There's been a whole bunch of them. And Gears of War, also popular from Epic Games, and Bulletstorm, and a couple, Paragon, which is currently a game from Epic Games. But all built with the Unreal game engine. And they started out making their own games and realized that they had a set of tools that was complete enough that they could sell it to other game companies to make their own games. So popular game titles like the Batman series and the BioShock series are made with the Unreal Engine. And the eventually, well, originally it was at a very, very high cost. Full licenses actually can still be purchased at upwards of a $500,000, depending on what you needed used for, what type of project you were using it with. But even for commercial projects, it's currently at $19 a month and 5% of the profits. They do some profit sharing model, kind of like a iTunes or model where you they charge the content creator 5% of the profits, where Apple, anything that goes through the iTunes music store or the iOS App Store, Apple gets 30 cents of every dollar that's sold in any one of those stores. So that's why Apple's doing all right these days. So Unreal says if you want to use our tools, if you don't pay the full price, then we'll just get 5% of the profits. And that's after $50,000 too. So it's an interesting business model for their software. They still can service the large game companies by having full licenses, like a huge company like the Batman series of games. The original Batman game was made for $40 million, and they made $80 million back on it. Well, 5% of $80 million is going to be quite a bit of money overall. And no, sorry, at that time it was 25%. And so 25% of $80 million was $20,000. No, $20 million. And it's still at a prohibitive cost that you would not want to share that amount of money if you have like some massive blockbuster. So they do have full buyout licenses that work for the larger game companies. And for the smaller teams that aren't making anywhere near that amount of money, they still have this profit sharing model of everybody makes more money if the game is successful. But for our purposes, free for educational purposes, free for non-commercial reasons. There's a lot of uses of the Unreal Engine for educational or non-commercial reasons. Go to unrealengine.com and you can get access to their software, their games. Let's see. I think I have Epic Games Launcher. Let this come up. But you can download their software and hello? Oh, that's right. I can't drag things on that screen. Hold on. You can get access to some amazing looking demos and levels and work with their tools and get access to... Uh-oh, did I drag it off the screen? No. Hold on a sec. Well, that works. Why can't I... I'm going to get it off the screen. There we go. Marketplace. They also have... Where is it? Hold on. Oops. Just levels, interesting environments for sound and music. Also, if I know you guys have access to Safari Books Online, and in Safari Books Online there's a great book called Game Audio Implementation, and it talks about using the Unreal Engine specifically for audio and music, with chapters on music and sound effects and dialogue and interactivity and setting it all up and understanding some great concepts in all of this. So definitely a great resource to check out. Sort of like the Unity game engine, the Unreal Engine is available on lots of different game platforms. It uses Microsoft X Audio 2, which is the default engine, audio engine of Microsoft products like Xbox and a lot of the PC stuff. If you're familiar, well, it's like Xbox and if you're familiar with DirectX on Microsoft, Microsoft likes to use X for the prefix of a lot of their stuff. Also integrates with Fmod Studio and Wise to allow for external audio middleware. So just a bit of info as to the tools that are available to to implement, well, to create a game and implement your music into that game. Game engines you'll see these very commonly in different job postings, different job opportunities that suggest maybe an understanding or skills in a particular piece of software. And the Unity and the Unreal game engine are very common overall. And next we're going to talk about 10 approaches to variability in game music. And really, these are 10 things that your game engine can do to your music beyond just playing it back. Since it's a WAV file, there is some control over how that WAV file plays back and in what way. So there are 10 things after the composition and production of your music that can manipulate and provide variation to the soundtrack for the gameplay. Now, before we get into this, let me take another quick pause. Let me know if you have any questions. But we'll get into our topics here in just a sec. All right. So, how can the audio be manipulated during playback? And a lot of these have a lot of functionality to create the interactivity in our game, as opposed to just statically playing our music and sound effects. Depending on what's going on in the game, different actions can control how the music is heard. So, first would be variable tempo. The game can adjust how quickly or slowly, how fast or slow, the music plays back. Now, this goes all the way back to the likes of Space Invaders and Super Mario Brothers. Early on in Space Invaders, there wasn't really music, but they had a lot of bleeps and bloops kind of sound effects that would go along with different things happening in the game. And the game never really got changed all that much. It just got faster and faster. And as the game got faster, the sound effects got played faster, and they noticed that it really created a sense of tension as everything sped up. In Mario, when the time goes less than 200, or sorry, I think it's 100 seconds, the music speeds up. It says da 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 da. It starts playing quicker, or actually that's the star music. But the music speeds up double time, and it gives you a sense that you can either go flying through the level or you better hurry up and get to the end. So speeding up and slowing down the music is possible. A lot of times that can be done from the composer's perspective, meaning that they can do that in the actual composition. But a lot of kind of cartoony games or platformer games or more simple games or kids games can actually use this to a great effect. So if you can speed up and slow down a piece of music, you can also speed up and slow down or raise and lower the pitch. Since slowing down a wave file lowers the pitch and speeding it up raises the pitch, pitch and time are often very closely connected in a recorded audio file. There's not a lot of use for adjusting the pitch of a piece of music in real time, especially since it's often a full stereo mix that's bounced into an audio file. You might get away over here of transposing a chord, transposing a triad. Maybe you can go do a 1-4-5 and kind of get away from it, but get away with it, but it would probably sound quite odd. So variable pitch in music is not as common as it is in sound effects. Variable pitch in sound effects is used all the time. This gives you variation in your sound. It also gives you often some life or modulation to your sound. So as your weapon charges up or cools down, you might have a pitch ramp that goes up and down. A car engine is a lot of times they will go out and record a car at a constant RPM and loop that. So they'll record it at 500 and 1,000 and 1,500 and 2,000 and create perfect loops that they then pitch change or basically do pitch automation to crossfade it from one to the next. There's all sorts of uses for things kind of rising and falling or building and falling down that can be a solid use for the ability to change an audio file and change its pitch in real time. Variable mixing. A lot of what your game is doing with your audio in real time is the variable mix. Most of what is happening in real time is it's controlling the volume and pan of all of the sounds that you currently hear at any one time. Volume is heavily connected to distance in the game. So as far the farther something away, the less you will hear of it, or the closer it is, the louder it is, the farther away, the quieter it is. And there's some sort of curve, whether it's linear or some version of logarithmic, between those 2 points. And panning. The game always knows where you are in the game world. It always knows which direction you are faced. Location and direction is a very core component of where you're at any one point in the game. And using that, it can determine where all of the other sounds are in the game and how far away they are and the direction in 360 degrees around you to create either a stereo mix or a 5.1 mix. So since the game always knows volume and pan, it can effectively take the top 100 closest sounds to you and determine how loud they should be and what the mix should sound like. There's basic rules that says, okay, this sound can never get any louder than this, and it's when it's all the way faded out at this distance, you won't hear it anymore. But you set up boundaries for how these sounds can react, and it uses the mathematics or the physics of sound to determine how to present those sounds or how you actually hear them. So variable mixing, you have control over volume and pan. The next one here is variable volume and dynamics. These are, as opposed to individual faders and pans, this is group control over volume and dynamics. So if you have a multiplayer game and for a portion of that game you are just running through the desert or running through the countryside trying to get to the next battle, and you hear the battle at a very distant, far off direction, and you're kind of running in that direction, and it's mostly footsteps and maybe some Foley or breathing, and it's kind of quiet overall. And then you reach over to the other side of the map, you get over there, you turn the corner, you enter a building, and there's 15 people all firing off their weapons simultaneously, and it's like the loudest thing you've ever heard in the game. How, in a multiplayer game where you don't have any idea or control over what's happening in the game, how do you understand, how do you create a volume mix? How do you create and control the volume of your all of the sound effects and music that is playing back? So we have saw in the previous slide, we have control over volume and pan. We also have group control over volumes. We have dynamics processors. We have compressors and limiters. So all of the weapons in the game can be controlled by a compressor and a limiter. All of the explosions. This chart up here represents basically the signal flow of the main output of the game, or some of the audio that passes through the game. Up here you have the main output. This is the output of your PlayStation or your Xbox. Right before that there is a limiter that represents the kind of a hard brick wall that says you can't go past 0, just so you don't blow up the consumer's speakers. We want to stop everything with a final limiter. You don't want to touch that limiter. You basically want to mix everything before that stage. The master bus, or the stereo output, accepts the dialogue, sound effects, and music stems. Each one of those has a compressor on it for ducking, so that the dialogue can duck the music and the sound effects. And notice that there's not much from the music, because that's, again, all the work is done by the composer. Most of the music is mixed. I mean, yeah, pretty much all the music is mixed, ready to go for the game. And then your music is just mixed against sound effects and dialogue, but they're often not going and affecting the separate stem mix of your music. Sound effects is broken out into a lot of different areas. Things like explosions get their own limiter. Vehicle impacts gets its own limiter. And you have control over how different categories of sounds or groups of sounds are going to be mixed and heard. So you have dynamics processors in your games. If you have dynamics processors in the games, you also have time-based processors going on also. That means we have things like reverbs, delays, EQs, filters, distortions, flangers, phasers, all sorts of fun stuff. And instead of them being controlled by time, meaning that the music and the time progresses in a DAW, they are controlled by parameters in the game. They can pretty much be connected to any function or activity or action in a game, whether it is how much health you have or how much time you have left or what the overall score is. It can be tied to distance. It can be tied to, it can be tied to time also, if necessary. So you get real-time effects. A lot of these are environmental effects to make it sound like a reverb is present in a game, so it can feel like you are either outside or in an airplane hangar or in a small hallway or in a large cathedral. Could give you different environment sounds. Third-party plugins are becoming popular. A couple of other game company, or a couple of plugin manufacturers are looking into the games industry to expand their horizons, so that plugins that you're used to interfacing with in your DAW are also available in the game world. They can still use massive CPU resources. Your plugins in the game are not as high quality as the ones that you find in your DAW. You are not going to do your sound design in the gaming software. You do not put in like white noise, put a whole bunch of effects on it, and get a sound effect on the other end. A lot of times the real-time processing in the game is meant for an environmental effect or to react to some gameplay event. It sounds good, but it's also very efficient, so that it runs smoothly as possible in the game. So while it uses massive CPU resources in comparison to the rest of the game, When compared to what we use it for in a DAW, like a Space Designer reverb, it doesn't actually use all that much. Well, the reverb in the game uses much less reverb processing power than something like Space Designer does. So it may be massive in the game, but what we're kind of used to, it's pretty efficient overall. So you would set up, like I said, ranges of minimum and maximum values that are controlled by the game. Depending on how close or far away you are from that sound, a minimum value or a maximum value, how low your health is versus a maximum of your health, or how low the charge is of your weapon versus its max charged up value, can actually affect these sound effects in real time. An example would be a walkie-talkie effect for dialogue. In a lot of games, if you walk up next to a character and start talking to each other, you hear them in their clear, normal voice, and then you start walking away while they talk, and it switches over to a walkie-talkie effect. That can be done by real-time effects processing that basically turns on and off a preset whenever they need it. So plug-in companies like Waves and WaveArts, McDSP, Isotope are basically making their audio DSP available, making their reverbs available, their EQs available. One of the first instances of this that I heard of was Waves. The Waves plugins were available to the developers for Halo 3. They basically made, since they knew Halo 3 was going to be exclusive to Xbox, they made plug-in versions of their Waves plugins available for the Xbox. They made the C4 compressor, the Q10 EQ, and the Renaissance reverb available in their games. So the sound designers, or the music composers could just go into their DAW, go open their Waves plugin, set it all up, then save a preset, then dump that preset into the game, and the next time they played the game, they could hear it with that real-time effect. So these plugin manufacturers are basically finding a pretty brand new audience available over in the gaming industry. A whole bunch of new folks to sell their plugins to. Now we're going to kind of lump the next couple of them together to be generative music systems. Again, these are still 10 variabilities or 10 things that the game can control with your music. We said there was pitch, and there was time, and there was real-time control over volume and panning, and compressors and limiters, dynamics processors, real-time time-based processing. But this is actually creating the music itself, getting down to variable melodies, variable harmonies, and rhythms. So this is having the music being generated by the game in real time. You effectively give the computer a set of rules to compose and play back the music, and the computer pretty much chooses notes out of a hat and plays them in a particular sequence or order to create the music. And it gets quite complex overall. And this is often where the music composers throw up their hands and say, hey, well, there's no need for us. The robots have taken over. The game will just compose its music all automatically for itself. And they don't need to even hire a music composer. And that is certainly not the case, at least not yet, and probably not even for the foreseeable future. It is still very difficult to teach a computer to write music. There's a lot of advanced study into making it happen, but to being able to create music that is as human as all of the humanity that we put into our music, there are inconsistencies and accidents and surprises in the way humans make their music that it becomes very difficult to replicate with a computer. So, defined by a set of rules or timings, and musicality. Will be random or different each time. It is effectively the computer choosing notes out of a hat. You say, okay, here's your drum. Here's some drum samples. Here's a kick, snare, and a hi-hat. You can play the kick on 1, 2, 3, and 4, but none of them back to back. Here's the snare sample. You can play snares on 2 and 4, either 2 or 4 or both. Here is the hi-hat. It can play an eighth note pattern. It can play triplets. It can play a wide variety. Well, no. It can play a series of 3 different hi-hat patterns. Here's your bass line. It's going to be in this pentatonic scale. Here's your chord progression. It's made up of these 8 chords that it randomly chooses from. Here's a melody. It's in this particular scale or key or mode or whatever. And at that point, the game just starts randomly generating. As long as the rules are strong enough and they make the most musical sense, it will be able to create some version of music. But it's some of the oldest technology we've had in game audio, but it's also some of the most futuristic advanced stuff that nobody's really gotten it figured out into not making it. Ends up sounding very wandering and random and abstract, because it is certainly random. Some of these tools are gaining popularity on mobile platforms because instead of recording a 2-hour-long audio file and putting it in your game, you could, or let's say, instead of recording a 2-hour piano concerto in a single audio file, you can sample 88 keys on your keyboard and teach the computer to play that same thing, right? At least in theory, certainly. And overall, you would save a lot of file size. Why do I need to record every single note over and over again during this performance if I could just sample all 88 keys and have the computer play it all back, right? So there's probably a huge human performance element that is missing out of all of that. Tools like MaxMSP and Pure Data are some of the most popular tools to work on these types of systems. Variable form. All right, so this is taking one step back from purely generative music, where it's completely random. The computer is entirely in the driver's seat. In this way, the form is open, but you have prescribed phrases that have been composed that you know that are going to work together. They're in the same key. They're in the same tempo, and they are kind of bound together by similar rules. And then the game just randomly fires these phrases off in any sort of order to create a continuous piece of music. Now, structurally, it's going to work because they're all in the same key. They're all in the same tempo. You composed it so that it would fit together. But again, it seems a bit random, a bit wandering. There's no strong structure to the music. How the song builds and falls is certainly a component of how we compose our music, and it can, again, feel random and kind of wandering as it just continues on. So there is the difficulty for the composer to make all of these pieces fit together. Again, you've already experienced a bit of writing in the same key, writing at the same tempo, having a couple of different variations of theme that still work when played together. But certainly can be a challenge to make enough pieces that it seems random, it doesn't seem to be repetitive, and still fit all together. And our final variation here, variation on form. This is known as the decision matrix, right? The previous variable form was basically random chunks of music that were just kind of repeated and shuffled around. Variable form is based off of some sort of decision or question that is answered. And it's a sequence or of steps or a workflow that your music follows to progress and change as needed. We have a flowchart here of a very popular song, Hey Jude, by the Beatles. And this kind of gives you an idea of how the music can shift and change based off of a couple of different decisions. Now, in a traditional piece of music like Hey Jude, the decision that is made is really just what verse are you in, what chorus are you in, how many times around have you gone. But in our games, this is the approach that we use, is this sort of decision matrix that is answering a couple of different questions based off of decisions or actions in the game. Whether the player knows it or not, their series of events that happen during their gameplay will change the music in real time. So this is how we go from intros to main loops to endings, or ambience to action, and switch back and forth. So for example, in the progression of your music in a game, there are certain parts that everybody has to go through. And so there are common parts of your music that's typically like the start and the end, where these are going to be set or constant phrases or music that everybody has to hear. So, Hey Jude, don't, and then you're provided with your first choice. Now, if this was a game, maybe the player had a choice of 3 different directions that they could go, or 3 different paths in the storyline. But again, for our purposes, it's what verse you want. Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Now, there are, depending on those choices, there are results, or depending on those questions, there are answers that are a result of the choice that the player made. So there are certain pieces of music that everybody hears. There are other pieces of music that are only heard by taking certain choices. Don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to, right? So now you enter something else that everybody has to hear, and then you're given a choice. Remember to let her into your heart or let her under your skin. Then you can start, or then you begin to make it better. Better, 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 why? And you go around, na, 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 na. You go through that loop. There are certain parts that are linear. There are certain parts that are branching. There are certain parts that are looping, that go around and around and around until something happens, and then you enter that whole loop all over again. And you kind of move your way through. So not all games are as kind of cut and dry as that, but kind of gives you a general kind of visual of what's happening here, where the player is constantly making decisions or answering questions. Did I do this? Did I make it here? Did I solve the puzzle? And dependent on those answers or those actions that they took, they will hear a particular piece of music. So the game has control over pitch and timing of your wave files. It has control of the volume and mix and which files plays back. It could generate and create the music itself, or it can create complex kind of branching interactive music systems for how your music plays back. Let's see. All of these variables, all of the different decisions are based off of pretty much any number of things. We talked about game states as really the question or the approach that your music is, or how your music is proceeding through the game. And it can be built off of pretty much any parameter or anything that you want to use in that game. And for our last topic here, a couple of resources that I want to talk about of getting started in the games industry. Some of what I'm talking here really doesn't have to apply just to the games industry, and is really more universal to being a freelance music composer, finding clients, working with clients, networking. But the previous topics and the projects and all of the material that we covered was the how does everything work. And now as we get into like what do we do with everything? How do we take the topics that we've discussed and the material that you've worked with and the projects that you've worked on, the knowledge that you've learned, the skills that you've gained, put them into some sort of package or format that you can use to show off to a client or a future employer. So we're going to talk about a couple of different resources of how do you find folks that are working in the industry, how do you find game developers that need that need a music team or an audio team to create their soundtrack, and just kind of a couple of resources that you can take beyond the class and hopefully continue an interest in what we've talked about this month. All right, let me take another quick pause here before we get into our last topic. All right. First and foremost, as a freelance music producer, freelance sound designer, engineer, audio songwriter, I don't know, any wide variety of things, game music composer, having a strong online presence is key, because that is where most networking is done these days. Most connections are made. A lot of the clients that I work with I've never met in person. I just work through the means of, I don't know, different instant messenger clients online and email and Skype and all sorts of different tools. So having a strong online presence becomes your online business card of being able to show off everything that you are capable of doing. So you should have a professional email, your own website that you can post all of your material to, which includes your portfolio. Your portfolio is always being updated and kind of crafted and built, refurbished. That's not the right word. Renovated. Nope, that's not the right word either. Updated. And maybe a blog to kind of give folks an inside view as to how you might create and produce your music. And also using social media. Social media tools are very, very key to finding and making connections and networking with folks. It is for all the good and bad that social media has in our society. It is very, very handy in our professional work. It's probably the best way that I keep up with news and clients and see what everybody's working on and find new projects out there. So your demo reel, everything should be as easy as possible. You want to basically consider that everybody that you are working with, all of your clients and everybody that might want to check out your music, everybody on the internet is lazy. They want to just click a link and watch something. They don't want to take the time to download anything. Nobody trusts files. It might all contain viruses and whatnot. So you're pretty safe to load up all of your music and your videos to a streaming service like SoundCloud or YouTube, and constantly keep it updated. I would hope every 6 months, but it's probably more like every 8 months to a year. I'll go through my portfolio, my demo reel, and update it with the newest and latest stuff. All the old bad stuff dies and goes away, and all the new stuff finds its way to the top of your demo reel. So you should be gathering as much material as you can through all of these last couple of classes. In your classes, you are building all sorts of, you're certainly writing music, but you're building a repertoire of media and sounds and songs that you can easily show off to a new client. Social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook are all extremely useful. Let me just point out a couple of things that I find are very nice. Let's see here. You guys have Twitter accounts and LinkedIn accounts and Facebook accounts. Pretty much anybody is on Facebook these days. But a couple of interesting things. Now, starting out with Twitter. Twitter is great. The problem with Twitter in the beginning is you have to know who to follow, and finding that out is kind of a challenge in the beginning. It grows slowly over time, but I find instead of just following people, I like to follow hashtags, and you can just search hashtag game audio, type that into Google, and go to Twitter, or whatever your Twitter client is, you can find all this stuff. Just search hashtag game audio, and there's a whole lot of folks talking about a whole bunch of stuff, like Mike Niederquell. He's actually a Full Sail graduate. He is looking for a kick-ass sound designer to help them with God of War. He graduated, he went through our game audio class, not the music production version, but the recording arts version, a while ago. Now he works out at Sony. Did a lot of cool stuff, but some great resources on there. Mark Kilborn, he's another graduate. Lost Chocolate Lab, he works out at PopCap Games. He's a great resource in the industry. Game Audio Jobs is a good website in general for jobs in the games industry. A lot of these folks are very popular people, really open and cool community of folks that are talking about all the things that are game audio. Audio Kinetic is, they make Wise. And so what you do is you find out who these people are, figure out which companies they work for, and just kind of follow them and see what they're talking about. You get interesting new tidbits about all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of resources, the music of Super Mario World. I don't know, just a lot of very cool stuff. So hashtag Game Audio gives you a good start. Game Audio Jobs, well, why don't you actually link me to Game Audio Jobs? Game Audio 101's good, but we'll do this. That and Game Audio Jobs. Audio specialist, you want to move to Beijing or Montreal, Ontario, audio designer in Illinois, senior narrative designer in Orlando. Associate sound designer at Blizzard. Yes, please. Let's check that one out. What else? Sound designer in London, Irvine, Brew, Paris. See, it could take you all across the world. What do they want at Blizzard? Associate sound designer, strong passion for all of these things. Not bad. Have you played World of Warcraft before? Would you like to do some designing? Look at that. Not bad. What else? Audio Kinetic. They've got some good stuff. There's my the other half of Engine Audio. Also works at Full Sail, talking about Wise and how it all works together. Anyway, what other fun stuff do we have? LinkedIn, Facebook. Now, one thing is with social media is that you can find these people and friend them and that's all well and good. But I find that once you are friends with them, you're on their feed, and so if you keep posting up good stuff, that's how I find out who a lot of folks are. Is they just keep posting up on my feed, and I see all sorts of things that they're interested in. LinkedIn is it's okay. It's so-so as a network of finding and talking with people. But one thing that it is very good for that I find is that it has an advanced search. And with the advanced search, you can type in company and title. So I use this for a lot of research when I'm figuring out who is somebody that works at a particular company, what their job title is. And I will search, if I know a specific job title, or I'll just search audio or music or sound or HR. The other people that are interesting to figure out is who is that? Hiring. There we go. HR and hiring. I would just type them in one at a time. Type in the company, and you can figure out who are all the audio people, who are all the music people, the HR and the hiring people at a particular company that you're interested in. You could even type in Full Sail, type in the school, and at a particular company, and figure out who are all the people at that particular company that went to that school and all that stuff. So gives you some research, gives you some information as to who these people are. And it just gives a great way of networking and contacting people, right? So I think I did this. Twitter, Game Audio, hashtag Game Audio. LinkedIn, it's got a great advanced search. A couple of other good resources out there. I didn't do Game Audio 101. Let me type in a couple of these. Game Audio 101, Game Dev Map. Designing sound. So here is, let's do this one. Here's Game Dev Map. And if you are in a particular part of the country or world that you either live in or you're interested in moving to, you can find all the game companies in that area. So I'll click on one of these, and I clicked on Austin, Texas. And there's quite a few of them over there. And it just lists all the game companies in your area. So you can then go to those pages. Where was... you could go to Electronic Arts here, EA Sports, and go to, where's About Us? Where's our jobs page? Games, help, news, jobs. Just keep searching for their jobs page. All of these different games companies have jobs pages. And on their jobs pages, career search, you can search out for current positions that are open. And I will typically do this. I'll go find a whole bunch of different game companies and go find all of their jobs pages. Actually, this is what this folder is. It used to be like 50 or so different game companies and just their jobs page. And then I'd go type in audio. Sure. View jobs. And it tells me that they need a couple in Canada. They need one here in Orlando. Development manager contract. Anyway, it shows just all the current jobs. Just keep checking out different game companies. Find their jobs page. I think this is a pretty cool one. Edge of Reality. Careers. A lot of times they don't have audio. No positions. Anyway. So a really good resource to find companies and find their different availability of jobs. Designing sound, a great resource for audio, sound design, music, games, movies, all that is sound and audio. I have a great just series of pages of all sorts of different stuff. So definitely something to just keep reading and keep checking out. What else do I have for you? We already did game jobs, game audio jobs. Oh, what about? I keep trying to type in game audio 101.com. There we go. They also have a jobs page somewhere. Jobs, game audio jobs. Audiovisual coordinator, audiovisual game engineer. Oh, your game's jobs page is not. It's not plentiful with jobs. Oh, not Monster. No. Well, that is lackluster at this point. What else? Other good things. There are sites like ModDB and NDDB, which look like this. And these are very popular sites of games that are in development. These are game developers that are looking for teams of people or that are teams of people that are making games. ModDB are folks that are taking previously existing mod games, previously existing very popular games, and making their own versions of them. IndieDB is taking or projects that are their own proprietary technology. They are their own games, and they're often meant for commercial sales. So they have each one of these has a jobs page that has an audio section, typically few and far between, but nothing this time. Oh, boo. But they're often looking for voiceover talent, composers, sound designers. I've found a number of projects that I've gotten involved in these different games, right? So let's just see what's something in here that looks very cool. Play as a monarch caterpillar, drunk on nectar. Ooh, that looks pretty at least. But you too could be a caterpillar climbing up a leaf, right? There's all sorts of crazy ideas for a need for sounds and music in games. So basically, getting involved in games, finding different opportunities, constantly paying attention to the news and what is happening out in the industry, playing games, getting involved, find a game team that you can get involved with. These are all just popular sites. Get involved in a game team. In your final project class, you have the opportunity of working with the game design students at Full Sail. The online game design students, they make games that need music and sound effects. So you can work on a couple of those to build out your portfolio. There's all sorts of stuff. So hopefully this gives you some insight throughout the month into the process of working on games, the skills that are needed for a music composer working on games, and what is generally involved in building a complete music soundtrack and the sound effects along with it. So if you have any other questions, please let me know as you continue through your different classes and you want to continue learning more about music and sound effects for games. Please stay in contact with me. Hopefully you might have the chance to come down and visit us at Full Sail for graduation. We'd love to come and say congrats and shake your hand. Keep in contact. Oh, I guess one more thing I could point out, speaking of random resources that are very useful. On Facebook, we have a game music composition site, and let me go there. Where is it? Game music composition. There we go. It's a site I keep updated with all sorts of new stuff. I should actually go post up There's a sound design intern at Sony. Some cool videos and posts. I should go post up that Blizzard one. Just keeping up with news and ideas and things in the industry. So check it out. Join our page and keep in touch with the group of folks in the class. And what else? Yeah, anything else you need, just let me know. It's been a great month. I've been enjoying listening to your projects and checking all those out. I'm going to finish all of the grading, get everything back to you for week 3, and we'll finish everything out for the end of the month next week. And other than that, have a good month and good next month. And yeah, thank you very much. I enjoyed the class.